think the worst owners are absent owners. Abramovich was an unbelievably good owner. He put his own money in, he left it with no debt, he was passionate about it, he came to games. When you walked into Chelsea, you've got really good players who've never won, and that's what triggered getting Mourinho. In some ways, Mourinho was the best money we spent because he laid the cultural foundations. United's a long way back. They've got to get their identity back. Rebuilding that, understanding the culture of what Manchester United is critical to getting success back in, because it'll flood back in the minute you start to do it.
Peter, it is such a joy to have you with us. Thank you so much for coming into the studio and sitting down with us.
It's a pleasure. This is a really cool place.
Thank you very much. I had absolutely nothing to do with it.
Yeah, you did.
Well, I mean, the team is very good.
The team is brilliant. We talk about this a lot when we do this show, and I think it's a great place to start. It's a question around football clubs as a business. Is a football club, in your eyes, a good business?
I think it can be. I think it's like any business, right? There's good, bad and indifferent, and you've got to... I do think sport as a business is the important way to approach it. That doesn't mean you can't be passionate about it. But I think first of all, you own a football club for a period of time. You're managing something that's going to be passed on to somebody else. And ultimately, before we started about fans. Fans are a critical part of the game. Right, really interesting. So I think you manage your legacy for a period of time whilst you own it or run it. And you've got to leave it in a better state when you leave than when you go in. And the only way to do that these days is to run it as a business.
Is there a conflict? You have a privately owned business where someone buys and owns. But really, as you just said, it's treated as a community asset. It's like you only loan it from the fan base.
Yeah. And I think you need to recognise that, right? Look, I never wanted to be in football in that sense. I mean, I got in by accident, as an accountant by trade, nothing like an accountant. Got out of that as soon as I could, but it gave me a great foundation. Then did company restructuring, and through that actually got involved with a sports umbro that was really ill and needed restructuring, and we focused that around football. So that was my entry into football, by supplying some of the biggest teams across the world with kit. So I saw football from a very different viewing platform in terms of outside looking in and doing deals with them.
Can I ask, you said there about that you've got to see it as a business. And I listened to you on Rio's podcast, and you said, you've got to see it as a business, but then you've also got to win. And the challenging thing for me as a business owner is, bluntly, a business wins by driving profit and having a great P&L and bluntly dropping as much to the bottom line.
Yeah.
That's not the case in football when you've also got to win on the pitch. And so my question to you is there an inverse correlation between the more you lose on the P&L, the more you win on the pitch? How do you think about that?
No, that's a cop-out, right? That's just bad management. Okay? I mean, I go back to football clubs are real community assets. They mean things to people, right? They get much more amplification than businesses that are 1,000 times bigger, right? And impact in some terms, in terms of audiences, or a lot less. But managing a football team or a team, sports team, full stop, is hard work because everybody knows how to do it better than you, right? And it does become linear. So if I lose on a Saturday and win on a Wednesday, everybody knows. You can have a company, as I said, that's 20 billion. Nobody knows who they are. Nobody knows who you are. You can walk down the street and it's fine. You walk down the street in King's Road and you've lost. You know about it. Right? So you need to understand what you're getting involved in. And why I say it's a business is because you've got to get the best people to do the best jobs. And that's where you've got a start point. Your structuring is that. You've got to, we've had a lot of new owners coming into the sport. That's good. But because you've built a multi-billion fund or a multi-billion business doesn't give you the right to be able to pick a football team.
You said about kind of getting the best people. Who do you think is the best hire that you've made when you reflect back?
Well, I learnt a lot from Ferguson, right? Who was probably the best man manager I've come across. I mean, he could take a team of individuals with him down to the bottom and up to the top when he needed to. I mean, he was an incredible man manager. There's this relationship between team and coach, team and manager, and I think there was a perfect fit with United and Ferguson. Right, and occasionally you get that, and I think they both made each other better. He was better because of United, and they were better because of Ferguson. And he was. I think he understood all the values of what Manchester United was. Going back to Busby, he respected it, he understood it, and what he did is, I think, really cement a DNA of what a Manchester United player needed to be, which today they've not got. Don't care how much money you pay for a player, they haven't got the DNA of that. He said something one day that the best player in the world may not be able to play at Old Trafford, and that sort of summed it up to me, right? And the best player in the world isn't necessarily what you want, by the way. He might be the best player in the world, but doesn't fit into what you did. So he fully understood that dynamic of team, what character beyond playing football needed to be. And he was ruthless, right? He was absolutely ruthless.
Did that clarity make your job as chief executive easier? Because you knew the culture that existed within the club, and you therefore did everything you could to sustain that, rather than having to create one yourself.
I went into United with the view of it was a restructuring job. It was modernising it. It was, it was a public company, and there was lots of teams at that point that had gone public for liquidity purposes, not to change the way it did business. What United did is for liquidity, but in a way that changed, and they understood it was no longer our money, it was somebody else's money, and we had to have the right governance. So we set ourselves apart by setting ourselves up like a business, like a public company, not somebody who just, cashed out and then ran the club like they'd always run it. And that's why being a public quoted football club doesn't work, because we became one of one in that sense. So I think we changed how football teams operated, because we had to, because it wasn't our money any longer.
How did you change how they operate when you reflect back on that? What are the kind of core pillars?
Everything, right? Everything. I mean, everything from we built the first, the class of '92 came through an indoor-outdoor cliff training ground, which compared to today is like, most local amateur clubs would have better facilities, right? We had a part-time doctor. We didn't have any marketing. We didn't have a commercial. We didn't, we had somebody who followed somebody around, the manager around for interviews with the Daily Mail or whatever it was. So there was no comms. So we actually built a proper business structure and supplemented, the playing side, which was part, and understood that there is a business side to a football club, which is not about the 24 players. Yeah. I mean, they are core to building the success on the team or the character or the personalities, but actually they're there to do the part of the job. And so it was really building it out from that point of view. And we were the first really club to do it, properly.
Would you say that you took advantage then of the new Premier League structure to be able to capitalise as an individual club in a bigger system that was now presenting this league as the forefront of global football? Yeah,
I think we took. I think because what we were not traditional football people. As I said, I'd done 10 years building a sports brand around football to be one of the biggest in the world with Adidas. So I understood how football worked. And I think one day I said to my missus, I'm never going to work for a football club. They're the most horrible organisations, right? And finish up at United. But, it was because there was this opportunity, I think, of what Premier League gave us, which was this separation. Murdoch was visionary, right? Visionary in terms of, he wanted to build a pay platform. We all are used to it now, but it was new in those days, right? A pay platform, and it would be based around sport and entertainment, and sport was going to be football. And so suddenly we had this revenue stream that we'd not experienced before. And we needed it because we had to, the government insisted that we went all-seater stadium because it was a mess. I mean, I remember coming back from travelling with England in '88 European Championships in Germany. It was carnage, right? You go to Italy '90 and Gascoigne crying in his shirt, and it's like problem solved. I mean, from '90 onwards, the football just grew and became respectable and became part of it was okay to talk about it. Right. In a business context, you could go into a boardroom and someone said, "Did you go?" And that was that wonderful time of football, really Premier League solidifying itself as leader in the market.
Here, we're looking at Man United, 90s, hugely successful, winning many Premier Leagues. How much did that contribute to your ability to build the business off it?
I think it was both ends. I think it was because the business was strong, the team was strong. Because the team was strong, the business was strong. Right? I think it's naive to think it's one or the other. There was a synergy in it from a point of view of, look, you can't be in sport today without having cash, right? That is naivety, right? You can be in it. It's pretty miserable, I would suggest. You're not going to win much. But just having the money doesn't make you successful. You've got to be smart about how you use money. But why is that different? Why is one business successful, one business not? It's people. So you've got to get the right people. You've got to get the right business structures. You've got to do the right things. That's what we did at United in that period. So we were highly profitable. We were the only club, arguably, that were profitable. But that money went back into United, went back into the team that made us more profitable. And that success period, that 8-year period was phenomenal. I mean, people forget, Murdoch rang up one day and said, "I want to buy United." 98. Okay? We spent...
What did you say?
We're a public company. You can
buy some shares.
You can buy it, right? But to get our support, you're going to have to pay us a premium. And we went 12 months. And it didn't go through because of government. And actually, it didn't go through because people came out of the woodwork who didn't want him to have it. And when we shut it down in '98, the question, when we came out of the lawyers and we said it's all over, he said, "What are you going to do now?" And we said, "Look, we're Manchester United, we're going to go on." And '99, we win the treble, right?
Can I ask, you mentioned the profitable status. Would that be possible in today's football environment, given the extremely large player expenditures that are just inherent within every budget for transfers that you didn't have in '88?
I think you're silly if you don't run it to not lose money, right? Do I think you're going to make lots of money out of running a sports team? No, but that's not an excuse to lose a lot of money, right? That's a fundamental difference, right? And what we've seen in all sports teams is their asset value go up, right? So you're getting a return in a different way, which we didn't have in that period. That's been a fundamental change, because sport has become an asset class now for a lot of people.
Do you think that's good? You mentioned earlier some people maybe come in because they have big funds and they may not know the traditions and the DNA. When sports and asset class, you have PE coming in, you have the largest financial institutions coming in. Is that good or bad?
Look, I think they're good. I think there are good owners and bad owners, wherever you come from, right? Abramovich was an unbelievably good owner. What anybody says, he put his own money in, he left it with no debt. He was passionate about it. He came to games. I think the worst owners are absent owners, right? Who don't feel the temperature of its fan base. That's just an investment. Oh, you know what? There's better things to just put your money in, right? Because I don't believe it's a normal PE play. Like we put it in here in 5 years' time we flip it. I think your marbles have gone if that's what you're trying to think you can do.
So Abramovich was amazing from an owner perspective and what he put into the club. But then for you, was that quite a strange transition where you're running a club, a public company, and looking very specifically at the business side of it and living within certain means, to then move into an environment where you've got a new owner who is really changing the face of how some clubs in this country are spending money, and you're almost told, you have a blank checkbook to be able to go and do this?
I spent 8 years in what today is still one of the most successful football clubs called Manchester United. Forget the on-field performance in terms of brand, what Manchester United represents around the world today, it's still right up there. And that was born out of that, 96 period that we all did what we needed to do to build it. Interestingly, Liverpool at that stage were a better known football club because of its success in the 80s. Yeah. What they never did is capitalise on it. They never commercialised it. So we went to Asia and owned Asia, and still do in many ways. So there's lots of platforms, there's lots of foundations put in that period that have, it's remarkable to me, the commercial success of United in a period of time where their on-field success has been awful, last 10 years, yeah? But it hasn't really diminished or damaged the commercial value of Manchester United.
Or the global brand.
Correct. So I think there's other learnings there in terms of, if you get these things right, they do operate like normal global brands. It is about that affinity, it is about that loyalty. And when it comes back with success, which it will do at some point because it's cyclical, right? It'll go back again. It'll explode again. So what I love doing is building things, right? And it's hard to think that I left United because I'm not a maintainer, right? I'm not a maintainer, and that sounds silly. People will call me all sorts of things for that. But the opportunity with Chelsea was to do it again in a very different environment. So the starting point for United was it had got good reputation. It was profitable. It had gone to the market. We were doing all those things that we did to make it more successful. Chelsea was bust. Effectively, he bought it almost the week it would have gone under. Okay, so it was a very different starting point. And it was amazing. 2004, it had exactly the same issues as United did in 96. Didn't have a training ground, didn't have a full-time doctor, didn't have any of those things. It's hard to believe that clubs operated like that in the same league, right? 8 years apart. You start again. The difference being it was London, and you've got a billionaire, right? So, but the job itself was the same job. It's like, how do you restructure this thing? So one of the big things, conversations that he and I had on several occasions before I even joined, is understand what you've got, what you're buying here. You're buying something that means a lot to people, right? So you got to treat it with respect. And he did, right? And always did from day one to the day he left. He fell in love with it. His first game was quarter-final Real Madrid, Man United at Old Trafford. That's when he fell in love with the game, and 7 or 8 months later he bought Chelsea. He became someone who knew nothing about football to probably, I think, the most knowledgeable owner. There's him and Miguel Angel Gil at Atletico, if you like. If you want to talk about people who really understand and enjoy it and know what it's about.
How did the way that you invest in building the clubs differ because of the structure? One is public, you've got scrutiny. One is private, billion-dollar financing. Yeah.
So look, this was a question of saying, so you do understand. It went like this. Look, this is a 5-year play. And he said, I don't want to wait 5 years to win. I said, no, it's different, right? What do you want to get out of this, right? What is it what is success to you? And I don't think these conversations happen often enough, right? The success is selling the football club that's distressed to somebody who's got some money. It doesn't do anything for you. So it was like, what do you want this to be? So I want it to be the best club in Europe. That's what he saw success being. So I said, that's 5 years. And his riposte to that was, I don't want to wait 5 years to win. I said, well, it's going to take you a couple of years to get into Europe. Then to be the best in Europe, you've got to always be in Europe. Right, it was literally those stages. What do we have to do that? Well, we have to, people always talk about how much money we spent. We spent smart money. First week was finding a training facility, and it took us 2.5 years to acquire it and build it. But in our first week, that was the foundation that we put in, because we were sharing facilities with the university near the airport. Couldn't train. This is a Premier League club in 2004. Thursday afternoon, you couldn't train because the university was using it, right? People forget where this thing's come from. It's not always been what it is today, which is the best sports league in the world.
So it was a challenge, was it? It was the challenge
Yeah.
laid down to be able to say, do you know what, here, we've got to create the best club. It's transfers, it's infrastructure, it's brand.
It's people. It's all those basic building blocks that if you go into a business, you have to deal with.
What was the smartest money you invested at Chelsea? Could be player, could be infrastructure, training, commercials.
There was more than one. I think the training facilities were a game changer. We had good players who'd never won anything, didn't know what it was like to win. The one thing that, again, I learned from Ferguson was, and he says, it's a great quote, like, until you've won, you don't know what it's like to win. And once you've won, you never want to lose. And what we got, when you walked into Chelsea, we got really good players who'd never won. And that's what triggered getting Mourinho, right? So in some ways, Mourinho was the best money we spent, right? The best money, because he laid the cultural foundations, right? He got it. We won the league the first year, right? We did double. I mean, he was the first of that next generation of coach, right? Genuinely, his suaveness, his coolness, his irreverence, his being the special one, sort of put the brand on the map, right? He got women supporting Chelsea.
Yeah. I loved him.
No. I mean, that's what I'm saying. So, depends how you say what's the smartest investment, right? But he really did start to build a culture that lasted there for 19 years.
With him, it's quite interesting because you probably could have gone out and he was hot property because he just won the Champions League, but he wasn't the biggest name that you could have maybe brought in here. Was he really difficult to kind of bring into this project?
He was just difficult. I mean, I can say that because I'm a friend of his. But you know what? They're all difficult. Yeah. So have one who's successful, right? Because
are they all difficult?
Yeah, of course. Because that's the nature of what you need to be. Right?
How did you feel when he sat in that press conference and went, "I'm the special one"? Did you go, "Oh"?
Oh. Well, he set the bar, didn't he?
Yeah.
But he was never fearful of pushing the boundaries, putting himself out there. I mean, he put the club out there on lots of occasions.
What was the biggest moment you were like, "Oh, Jose, oh no"?
There's too many to mention. I mean, he did push the organisation, right? I mean, we're an organisation that was new in those terms.
Yeah.
But actually, that's what we were looking for. We were looking for, and again, Alex probably hated the fact that he had such an impact on Chelsea being successful because of what I learned from him. What I did learn is that Claudio's a lovely guy, right? But he's not the winner that Ferguson was. He's not the winner that Jose was. And we took a pretty early decision to look and make that change. We also did the right thing. We'd lined up somebody that we felt was represented us, brought the skill set we need to move on before we moved him out. And we went on this incredible run, right? I mean, incredible run. So pretty early on, I sat down and said, look, we need to change the coach. And it's like, well, what if we win? We still need to change the coach, right? Because you've got to look at long-term success, which is one of the biggest challenges, I think, in a sports team. Not getting dragged into, we've won 7, so we're really good, or everything's good, or we've lost 7, so we're really bad. Keeping it on a track of, look, we're doing the right things, do the right things with the right people, with the right processes, with the right... You get there, right? You're building this for the next 20 years, not the next season, is one of the biggest challenges in a sports team. What
does a Ferguson and a Mourinho have that makes them a killer winner that a Claudio maybe doesn't?
The winners. I mean, they win. The top boys have all got this ruthlessness about them, this belief in themselves and commitment that is 24/7, right? Relentless. And you know, they build incredible loyalty, right? People walk through walls for them, go that extra mile. They sort of impose leadership on the individual. They make people really accountable. I think the best sports coaches are the best people managers in the world, for all sorts of different reasons. But they are building this ultimate team, right? Where, you know, most top sports teams have got a lot of people who believe they're the best, right? Yeah. That takes a lot of managing.
Both amazing man managers,
yeah,
but also both very different.
Yeah.
Right. So how were they different?
Old and new, right? I mean, Jose comes from a very different background in terms of, you know, how he got to be where he was than a Ferguson. Age, I mean, style. You know, people sort of assumed Ferguson was a special one. Jose told you he was a special one. You know.
But I guess he kind of had to. Right? As new kid on the block, he comes in and he goes,
yeah, you know.
It's me.
I think there's more similarities than differences. In you know, styles different, but it's interesting. They both respected each other.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, arch rivals, but both fundamentally respected each other. Became sort of, you know, and that's what these guys do.
Did they look for the same things in players?
I think they've got a real good understanding of what they need, and I think a lot of that is the culture. We had Cech, Lampard, Terry, and then we got Drogba, right? I mean, fearsome. You had 4 captains at any one time on the pitch, in that sense, and then the rest of the team got built around it. So there's that understanding of who's gonna die for me. I've got 4 of them, and you know, and they're all big personalities in different ways, and then the rest. It's hard to say the rest of makeup because we had great players, but they've got this ability of building this team, right? Which ultimately is how you win. There's very few things that one player makes a difference.
Just on that then, and you're looking at your role in a transfer market.
Yeah.
A huge part of the chief executive job is recruitment and being able to find the best people that fit this.
Yeah.
Did it make that job then at Chelsea, did it make that kind of a very different one to the one you had at United? Because you had this new model that you were
No, I'll tell you
creating?
what, you know what, again, I think we changed the model at United and we adopted that model. And that model was no longer does the coach, the manager, we stopped calling them managers, the coaches. Yeah. Right? Manager did everything. Manager said which train they were going to travel on, which hotel you stayed in, which player we're going to buy, how much we bought him for, and how much we pay him. Come on. So that all got changed in the, you know, late 90s
because it had the
to.
perception
Correct.
that managers buy, they set the price, they do all transfers, and they don't.
They don't, right?
So who does?
No. So we changed that in the 90s. We took that to us in the 2000s, and listen, Jose will talk about the holy triangle, right? Which was Abramovich, me, and him. So Abramovich never bought a player that the coach didn't want. Never picked the team, right? Jose never got forced with playing somebody. So my job was to arbitrate those two. They both had opinions, right? Which is great. But our job was to sort of say, let's get 3 or 4 people for each position, of which the coach is happy to have and sign off on. Because it's not linear, right? These things are difficult to, as a transaction, they're difficult to do. You know, for all sorts of different reasons, you know, relocating players, contractual obligations, cash, no matter how much money you've got, you know, it's not just about money. So you always had to have, you know, a number of players per position that you could choose from in order to get a deal done. And that sort of holy triangle was Roman signing off, Jose signing off, me being able to get it done, right? That's how it works, and the best teams do it that way.
What deal were you told to get done that you just couldn't get done?
probably the Brazilian who thought he was coming to Chelsea and finished up going to Man City.
Robinho. This crushed me.
I think he thought he probably signed for Chelsea, didn't he, when he came over?
He thought City was in London. And actually that was, on reflection.
Were you gutted?
No, listen, you got to be just, it is what it is, right? We were annoyed. Right? We were annoyed because it's...
Was he.
Yeah, you put a lot of it. You put a lot of effort into these things. These things aren't, you're not playing FIFA Manager. They take a lot of planning. They take a lot of just making things happen. There's a lot of moving parts. So it's the lost opportunity.
That was going to be my question. Look, can you take us through a deal? So what is it actually like going through a transfer process?
They're all different because you're dealing with, the big difference was getting deals at value with Chelsea, because you got somebody who is, was perceived to be the richest person in the world, and money didn't matter. Money did matter. And it, it had to matter because there were regulatory frameworks. There was less regulation then than there is now. But I mean, we're all seeing the impact of FFP, and that's really, it's not about money any longer. There's people with a lot of money who can't spend it now. Yeah, so which effectively has locked the big boys in. I mean, that was my argument with UEFA a long time ago.
So your argument against?
I said,
FFP.
look, I'm fine, thank you very much. But what you've done is you've not leveled the playing field. You've actually locked me in. I'm a big boy. I've used that. I've got scale that these guys are never going to get.
How much of FFP's introduction was a reaction to the success of Chelsea in the 2000s?
I think there was definitely a reaction to that. Like, how do we stop so-called these rich people coming in and taking away our sport? United wasn't that in that sense, and it had grown. You don't stop at Madrid. That's what I'm saying. That super group are still the super group that they were then. So it's done nothing to bring them down.
But there was almost a feeling maybe, and you look at it now from a perspective, if you had these clubs, the historic winning clubs, the cultural clubs, the Man Uniteds, the Liverpools, the Real Madrids, etc., and then you have a club like Chelsea who have won in the past, but it's not ingrained in a culture, coming up and competing. And they probably didn't like that at the same time as well.
No. It's pretty poor at change, right? It's not an early adopter, it's a follower. I mean, that's hard to believe, but in so many instances, it follows, not leads. And I think it's like, well, put up the protection, right, as opposed to embracing change and just continuing to be at the forefront, because it's got so much to offer. Sport's got so much to offer.
The one thing I'm fascinated by with Chelsea compared to other clubs, and you've got the perfect comparison here, because you had Man United's success built on continuity and legacy and consistency, and you had Chelsea, who, I appreciate this, continued long after you left as well, but were able to change who led that team.
That was
continually and still succeed.
That was a conscious decision.
Why?
Because the days had long gone where you're going to have people in jobs for life, right? So the downfall of United was the success of United, in that they didn't have a succession plan. Okay? I mean, so we consciously took a view.
Respectfully, was that not Moyes? I always had, for the years before, it was always like he was being groomed in a way to take over. He was the kind of...
it didn't work, did it?
Well, no. So, but it was a succession plan. It was just wrong.
No, it wasn't a succession plan. You don't let the two people that have influenced United for a period of years, the CEO and the manager, leave at the same time. It's a joke, right? You should be shot for that. I mean, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about a business, right? What business would let their two key employees walk out the door the same day? You don't even know where the plug sockets are to plug stuff in, right? So don't get me on that. It really annoys me. But we did take a different view with Chelsea from day one, and that was, look, the Europeans years ago. I sat down with the Milan boys and with Perez. I mean, they thought we were crazy having a coach that lasted longer than 4 years. It's not in their psyche. It's like, well, you got the best out of him then, and if he lasts 4 years, that's about it. That's the end of his cycle. Okay, it was just a very different approach to coaches, and they want to do the things they want to do, and it's our club type stuff. Quite interesting. Still successful in the sport, but a very different psyche. So we took a view that look, you're not going to have another Wenger here. You're not going to have another Ferguson here. So we've got to be able to drop people in and build an infrastructure around that coach. So we stopped. So with Jose, it was, again, people used to bring 10 people with them, and then when they left, they took 10 people away with them, right? So you're building it every 2 years or 3 years, and it's like, this is not sustainable. Financially, it's not sustainable, and it just doesn't give you any continuity. So you're all going left for 2 years, and then everybody's got to go right for 2 years. It's like, so we genuinely, and that was that whole culture around the training ground and the academy, and those long-term platforms, which Chelsea doesn't get any. Chelsea never got any kudos for, because they did really change. Again, I think the way that a lot of football works now. So it was built from day one for long-term success. Way after I went, right? But I mean, you look at their record, 20 trophies in 19 years. I mean, phenomenal.
So really the Ferguson of Chelsea, Ferguson moment, lack of succession, was Abramovich no longer being a part of it. That was where the shift really happened. The success was driven so much by him, correct? And
I think he underpinned. One, he was passionate about the club, right? He actually knew what was good for the club and what was not good for the club. It was his money, right? When it was, the arrangement was like, it's debt that kills teams, not spending money, right? So you can never leave these things.
How does debt kill teams, just for those that don't understand?
That kills most things, isn't it? You can't, you're spending more money, more time on servicing it than being able to use it and spend it, and so it was always there was always really strict parameters around conversion of loans and that into equity. So you can deal with it when you've got a business that is debt free, right? And particularly a football club, which is it's got big cash calls, as we talked about, and you need cash to run a sports team.
Totally. Can I ask, we mentioned the kind of frequency of managers there. How does a manager removal discussion thought process go? And when does a thought process become a decision?
Again, they're all individual. You're dealing with individuals and individual circumstances that make those changes. We'd gone from not winning anything to winning things, and then suddenly it's like we want to win in a different style. Okay. But it's like we want entertaining now. Now we've got some trophies, now we want entertaining. And sometimes you can't get both, right? When you've not won anything, you just want to win. Everybody just wants to win, right? I've had some special moments. One of them was, securing the title for Chelsea at Bolton, right? Which is when we did it, and it was like, the most unglamorous, like
the Reebok Stadium,
the
centre of dreams,
like the most glamorous team at that point in terms of London and Mourinho and Abramovich and Chelsea. We secured the title. Phil Gossard did a great job in putting in lots of bottles of champagne in the changing room for everybody. So it was nice, and which again brought football together. But we went from this team that hadn't won anything, that was starved of success, that was always sort of bigger than it was, to then doing it, and then suddenly it's like, oh yeah, we've won, but it's not that entertaining, is it? Well, we've got a guy who wins, right? And he ain't going to change his way. So if that's what you want, you've got to change the coach.
Well, I mean, 15 goals conceded that season, right, is probably a record in football that I don't think will.
But he went 4 years. When you look at his period in Portugal and his period at Chelsea, he went 4 years without losing a home game.
80-something matches, isn't it?
So it was a bit like the Liverpool of old, right? You went to Anfield and there's the sign, and it's like, we're already one down here. I mean, it became that strong. So look, Jose wanted to leave at the end. It was it wasn't a hard negotiation. It was, Pete, can you get me out? I
Really?
said, yeah. Go to the cinema, come back at 11, and we did the deal. So that's what it was. Right?
How do you message that to the team? Do you say that,
Difficult.
Yeah.
Because it's not, that was a double whammy. It was him going was a hard message, because he did, again, you know, these boys do connect. Yeah. You can't be successful without connecting. There's nothing passive about it. It's like all in type stuff. What made that one difficult is you know, it was Avram that took over. So that was I think probably my hardest morning in 30 years in football or in sport.
Why?
Just because I saw when we made the announcement, I saw the look on some of the players' faces, and it's like, you know, suck it up and get on with it. And you know, they are incredible professionals, right? I mean, again, we very nearly won the Champions League that year, right? I mean, that's how strong the culture had got, because it was more about the players than the coach at that stage. You know, Avram's a great guy, and he's a good, you know, he's a good coach in certain circumstances. But following Jose, and then that team going on to, you know, be penalty kicks away from winning the Champions League in Moscow. That was a player. That was the strength of that squad.
Why did you choose Avram?
He'd been part of the club for 6 or 7 months. It just became untenable, right? There was, you know, there was a change. There was a change of guard. He was available. It's a real problem, and there's got to be a rebalance in my view, and that is, the players are more secure. I won't say powerful, but they're more secure than the coaches. So it's too easy, I think. I think it is too easy. I hear too many stories of owners going into dressing rooms and talking to players, right? It's a kiss of death. There's got to be a hierarchy. There's got to be a management structure. I come back to, in what other business would you undermine the guy who's there to run that part of the business by going and saying, what do you think of him? Or, you know, don't you think you should have played better today? It's like, that's not good for the sport, right? I don't care who you are. If you win under those circumstances, you're really lucky, and it's not sustainable, right? Because it's not, right? So I think people talk about the shift of power. I don't think there's a shift of power. I think there's a lack of management. I think there's a lack of strong managers don't let that happen. You'd never get away with that with a Ferguson. You'd never get away with that with a Mourinho, right? And you want those people to do the job that you can't do.
When you feel discontent in the dressing room as a CEO,
that's the problem.
To what extent do you say, Jose, you need to get this shit in order, versus, this is not my domain, I hand over?
No, that's different. You know, that's different. I mean, again, the relationship isn't I'm your boss, but the relationship is we're in this together, right? The time you have to change it is when you've lost the dressing room, right? Because you don't get them back. I mean, these guys are the best at what they do, right? And I've had the enjoyment and luck to be with the very best of the best. So they're self-starters. They genuinely put themselves under more pressure than anybody else could, but they're very responsive to, their coach. So the coach's job is to coach these people who, you're not teaching them to play football, right? But it is managing that, you know, you did a lousy job today, and you're not getting away with it, and you're not putting the effort in, and, you know, all those management things around, as well as tactical. You know, some coaches are great coaches, not very good at tactics, right? That's not everybody's good at everything. So it's complex. You know, sports complex. Sports teams are complex. They're small businesses that have got major amplification that people think they're bigger than what they are. They're not.
Yeah. Is too much put on the coach now? Is the coach the easy target now in decision making, where if something's failing, the target is the coach. We sack the coach. It's the hire and fire change culture.
I mean, I think they are the heroes of a team. If I'm being honest, from a point of view of, if you think about it, they've got the dynamics of the sport. They've got the responsibility of putting, athletes to be at the peak of their performance for 3 o'clock on a Thursday or 7 o'clock on a Monday or whenever that is, and that's getting more complex, right? And everybody's struggling with that in terms of just number of games and just, it's at such a level now. It's intense. They're also the interface for the club of the media, so they represent the club. They're the face. I mean, most clubs you don't know who the CEO is, or the owners. You only know if they're doing things that they shouldn't be doing, right? So the media aspect, the fan aspect, it's direct. If you're on most people haven't experienced sitting, on the bench and hearing what goes on. It's not all nice, okay? Yeah, I mean, critical or fun. Part of the wonderful thing about football is it's fans, which I guess we all learned during COVID. Football without fans is not football as we know it. It's pretty boring stuff. But that coach is the one who takes all that and manages it in an environment which is more visual than any other job, I think.
But we're talking about two clubs now in similar, should we say, challenges, where you've got Chelsea and Manchester United at the current really struggling to find any sort of success. Let's say you put Jurgen Klopp in either of those jobs. Is it as simple as saying he would be able to succeed, but actually the structures around it at the moment on both clubs look like they don't facilitate what you've talked about, which is the formation of a culture and an identity that's required for success?
Look, it's hard for a Manc boy to say Liverpool did a great job, but Liverpool did a great job in lots of ways, right? The ownership have been a great ownership group. Fenway have been great. They took it over from, two very different ownership groups who really tried to destroy it. They got hold of it. I think the Klopp piece was a perfect fit for that period of time. You looked at what Klopp did and where he did it. He came from one area in Germany very similar and fitted in. Culturally, he fitted into Liverpool. And he sort of played a style of football which is about work hard. I mean, his work ethic is off the charts. I remember watching warm-up at Real Madrid Champions League game, and their warm-up was more than what most players did in a game, right? I mean, it's demand for that. So the fit of that ownership and coach was what made Liverpool successful, and it looks like they've done it again with Slot.
Yeah.
I think it's so important to do that.
So where are Man U and Chelsea going wrong?
I think United's a long way back. It's got to rebuild. I think they've got to get their identity back. And
how do you do that?
It's long, isn't it? But there was one comment that the coach recently said, and I loved it. And it was like, that's old United. It's like they'd had a good result, and he said, I'm really annoyed about the previous 3 results, where had we applied ourselves like today, we'd have won it. And that's what I thought, that's good on you. Because I think rebuilding that, understanding the culture of what Manchester United is critical to getting success back in, because it'll flood back in the minute you start to do it. So I think it is a long game. I think it's brilliant that, again, we've got an owner who understands what Manchester is, understands, he goes to games, right? Feels it when you lose, but grew up in an environment where he knew what good was, knew what a good Manchester United team is. You don't get that when you never come to a game, right? And you don't understand it. So they'll get there, right? I just think it's going to be a hard road.
We mentioned the manager transitions and building an institution around them that means that they can kind of slip in and out. When you review the manager transitions, which manager do you think you should have given more time to, and any lessons from that?
There are so many factors, really, and there are so many factors, and you know, Roman was pretty impatient, right? So I think there's a lot of the managers who could have done better with a bit more time, if I'm being honest. The amazing thing is,
is there one that stands out?
No, I honestly don't think so. I mean, look, when you look at some of the coaches we had, I mean, you know, Carlo's style is so different than everybody else's, but the success he gets is phenomenal, right? So he's so different to a Jose or an Alex, but look at his track record. It's amazing, and I think we'll go down as one of the true greats because he's done it in several countries. He's done it at the top level, and he does it in a way which is Carlo. And he's a super person. But I think what we're back to is that the real magic is when you get the ownership group, the coaching, and the sort of management together in one place. Great things can happen. Because it's not down to one person. It's really not down to one person. And I guess the United Chelsea thing demonstrated that. Two very different styles, both dominated for periods of time with very different operating models in that sense. And I think it is about carving out your own, how are we going to do this, but understand that just spending money doesn't do it.
So that was actually going to be my question now. In a very different environment with regulation, how difficult is that to do now in a current system with the financial restrictions?
I think you just got to be smarter, right? I mean, I think, you've got to be smarter. I think it's more difficult for the smaller clubs just to break out, because we have baked in, the giants. By the regulation has worked in doing that as opposed to equalising it, which was the regional. So I think you've got to accept that.
So would you check PSR, all of these words now that we hear regularly in the media, which didn't used to exist?
Yeah.
Do you think they are the best measures to help deal with the challenges that football faces from a financial perspective?
First of all, I think we're in the enviable position of having the best football league in the world, right? I think we're the best league. I think Champions League is the best club football. Why we keep wanting to add, non-games to it. I'm sure it sort of came together on the final day when we understood what the league looked like. Up to that point, you never understood.
I quite enjoyed it.
Did you? Did you? Yeah. It's probably me. But I think we've got to recognise what this thing is. It's the best, biggest sport in the world. We are part of the best league in the world, where the quality of football we turn out every week is phenomenal. And it's because the bottom can beat the top on any given day. It's that competitive element that we've got to make sure that is built into sport. That's what sport's all about, a winner and a loser. Right? Being average is don't make the best sportsman or best sports product. So that's what we got, and we got to do whatever we have to do to protect it. In my view, and keep challenging it and keep pushing it. There's a lot of other parts of Europe that want to keep pegging us back, so we've got to be smarter at that. I think we've got to be at the forefront of moving the sport forward. I don't think closed franchise league is right for football at all. So I was delighted that the Super League got canned in its format. And it's not that I'm against the Super League in terms of, but it's got to be better than what already exists. And you can't have clubs who finish 9th in Champions League, right? It's just that's not what the essence of this sport's all about.
Yeah, I mean. You just touched on it there, but there is, despite all of the success and everything, I think to me it'd be pretty hard to say that the current spending is sustainable. We have transfer markets that have massively inflated. We have wage budgets now that are enormous compared to the money that these clubs generate. And eventually, we have to find a way surely to rebalance that, because otherwise the sustainability of these businesses goes out the window.
But you know what? Everybody wants a solution. Well, you don't have to pay somebody $400,000 a week. That's your choice, right? And if you think that gives you can't buy success.
But the trouble is, if you don't, someone else will.
Well, okay. You know what? Another learning from Ferguson. If anybody said, "Oh, I've been offered more money to Real Madrid," go to Real Madrid. You don't come to United because we paid the best money. We paid good money. We were more than competitive, but you never ever paid the most. If you're not smart enough to, in this world of getting the best players to come to a Manchester United for less money than somebody else, you're not doing your job.
But that's Man U. When you were Chelsea,
you're not doing it.
But also, everyone is human, and when you get given by the Saudi league $500,000 a week, and the alternative is 200, which is more than competitive, but 500K, we're both humans, and you've got families to feed, and often they're paying for huge families. Oscar in China was very clear in saying, "Hey, I just had to take the money."
Listen, that's fine. That's an individual taking that view. Good luck to him, right? I'd shake his hand and say, "Thank you very much." That's different than the responsibility of the club to make sure that the team, the squad, the money you've got, you've just got to be better at getting the right players. Why are Brighton doing a good job? Because they haven't got the luxury of doing what other people have, which is spending a huge amount of money for no success.
Well, they also run, by the looks of it, a 365 transfer window.
Yeah,
right?
okay.
Which is continual, which is amazing. They have a succession plan. You spoke about succession. They seem to have players in place before they sell the players they eventually do.
Well, I also think that, I think they're one of the smartest clubs in terms of coach.
Yeah.
They know the next coach before this one's gone.
How much of that's down to Tony Bloom?
I think you've got to say a lot, right? I think he's got a good management team, so it's not just one person, but I think what he's put in there. But, how many times do we see a team that has spent a fortune in the summer window with a coach who plays one way, it's not working by October, and we bring another coach in who plays completely different football?
Well, that's Man United this year, right?
And think that that's going to work. Now, that's not about money. That's just stupidity, right?
Yeah. I agree.
It's just, that is not about money. So I get annoyed when it's like you just buy it or you just spend money and you become successful. There's way more to it than that. Way more to it than that.
So basically then, what I was really getting at is, because it's been a topic of conversation in a few other chats, it's this non-reliance on owner financing. Right, and creating the models in the game to be able to do that. But by the sounds of it, you've got to self-regulate a little bit as well here.
Yeah.
It's not down to centralised governance telling you what you can and can't do.
We had a view that we needed to set up Chelsea to not lose money. Did that matter to Roman? No. Right? It mattered to the club. It mattered to the way we did things. We got there in 7 years, not 5 years, right? But it's the responsibility, it's the financial responsibility, right? That if Roman went in year 3 or in year 7, it turned out it was in year 19, right? The club is still in a position where it can operate, right? That's the responsibility that people have got to understand here. And if when you leave, you put it in such a mess that it gets relegated or it goes out of business, that's immoral. People are not doing the job.
A big part of kind of the reliance or lack of reliance will depend on media rights and how much money comes in from it. And you mentioned kind of Murdoch innovating in the way that he did, way back when you were at Manchester United. I'm just really interested, when we look forward at the next 10 years of media rights, how do you think that future will look?
A period of change. I think we're in, digital, OTT, traditional TV, massive change going on. Nobody's really worked it out yet, right? I think everybody's still grappling with it. It will evolve, won't it? I mean, the way that the next generation absorb games is not 90 minutes or, a race time or whatever. So but nobody's really got that model worked out. And again, I think that's going to be one of the biggest challenges that sport faces in terms of how do we go from traditional models, and because media values of sport is such an important factor of its revenue, whatever sport you're in. And the big winners have been the ones that have been able to generate more, which is why football's been an absolute winner over other sports. But I do think it's one of the biggest challenges that sport faces.
You're involved in Formula One now, and I was interested if you think that on this, the mediafication, should we say, of Formula One has elevated the profile of the sport, and
sure.
as we were talking about before we came in, created a whole new fan base. Is there something football can take and learn from what Formula One has done over the last 5 years?
I think that both ends. When I was in football, I looked at F1. Now I'm in F1, I look at football and other sports, because I think, again, the real competition is about where you are in the ecosystem. So if I'm part of F1's 10, you can bet your bottom dollar that I'm competing for money that's looking at other sports, not just them. So I see ourselves very different. F1 does things really better than football. Football do things really better than F1. And I think it's about being open. NBA do things which could be adopted. There are cultural differences, there are structural differences. But I think the winners of that next generation are the ones that are looking at how we make our sport and our business better. It's that longer term view. And one of the big problems with sport is it drives a lot of short-term thinking. And a lot of that is not enough money.
But this is why I don't see how a sports team can be a public entity, though.
Yeah,
because
correct.
Public entities, by very nature, are quarter by quarter. You are judged based on that quarter's performance. You can't really do that long-term thinking, planning with that structure.
And that's why we took Manchester United private again, right? We took it private because it didn't operate. And that's why, pure PE doesn't work for sport, because you haven't got that, buy it, build
3 to 5 year
flip
window.
it, no chance. That's not to say people won't make money just because of the escalation of the asset price, but that's not building the sport. That's not being a good custodian of it.
I meant to drop this in earlier, but we got distracted. It was around the influence that you had around the commercial success within some of these clubs. And should we say, let's easy front of shirt sponsorship deals where for United you had Vodafone, for Chelsea you had Samsung. We're looking at a Chelsea kit now, it doesn't even have a front of shirt sponsor. How important was the relationships with those brands in building on the story that you talked about for the team outside of it? I mean,
incredibly important, because they helped us build our brand. I mean, they amplified what we did. The right partnership, the right partnerships or partnerships. Wow. So Samsung, one of the best accolades we had was the chairman of Samsung said the success of Samsung Mobile was because of what Chelsea did. That was real. What they did for Chelsea was incredible. So getting those, and it goes beyond just the main sponsor. Getting those partnerships right, fundamental, I think, to again the robustness, the culture, what the brand stands for, and it's such an important part of the industry.
I don't want to kind of chastise any specific team, but not having a front of shirt sponsor just feels like poor management. I mean, it just doesn't feel okay. Is that me being unfair and unreasonable, or is that fair?
I don't think it's okay. Right? For whatever reason that is, I don't think it's okay. Again, because I think it goes back to these are big revenue drivers.
Yeah.
Right. If it's just, even if it's about...
How much is a front of shirt today?
A lot of money for a big team.
50, 60 for a
It's
big
a lot
team.
of money.
Wow. Okay, 50, 60.
50 to 60 mil, yeah.
But
so
I
you're missing
think,
out on that.
but again, I think the commercialisation of the sport is really important, because look, in F1 it's the car, in football it's 24 players. They don't come cheap. You either decide that I'm just going to rely on somebody writing a check every year, which I don't think is sustainable. There's all sorts of reasons why people who could write checks don't write checks anymore, right? And it's not always because they don't want to; it's because they can't. So do you want to be in a precarious stage where you put this thing which is so valuable to you as an entity, to a fan base, at risk? You've got to have responsible management. You've got to have a responsible view on life. And that is, the more self-sustainable you can be, that might mean lose less money, right? If that's your objective, that's fine. But it's better than just opening the doors and just spending willy-nilly forever.
Did you have brands fighting for those relationships?
You've got to create a competitive environment. Yeah. We basically, at United, we went from like 100 sponsors to 10 and said, we're selling scarcity. With Chelsea, we told the story of where we were going to go. We want to challenge your brands who wanted to build things, and we said, look, come with us and we'll help you build them, because we're on a journey. And we've done the same at Williams. Williams will be the biggest comeback in sport ever.
Really?
Yes.
Why?
That's a big one.
Because it's got an incredible heritage. It's an independent team. It's not selling soft drinks. It's not selling fast cars or slow cars or whatever. It stands on its own. It's, one of the third longest cars teams in the sport. It's multiple world champion. It's built on the ethos of, Frank Williams. And we are committed to getting it back to the top of the grid.
Leading team principal, big new title sponsor, solid ownership.
Yeah.
What else do you think now?
That's two good drivers.
Two good drivers.
Two excellent drivers.
Two exceptional drivers.
Exceptional drivers.
Exceptional drivers.
And a long-term plan of doing things for the future, not just for today. So the underpinning of those foundations are all being put in place. So money, people and processes, it's a matter of when we were successful, not if.
It's funny, different sports, same foundations.
Yeah. And real success is when all that comes together. And that's what's going to happen at Williams.
Can I ask one more before we do a quick fire? We said about best investment from Chelsea time, and you said, kind of ultimately Mourinho. On the flip side, what was the worst investment? Where you're like, oh no, Peter.
Veron.
You did it twice, didn't you?
Yeah. yeah. I bought him for United, sold him to Chelsea, and then Veron
didn't work.
I remember the first game at Chelsea. He ran down the right-hand wing. He did a cross with a back flip, with his right leg going behind his left leg that went in, and the whole crowd went, I've never seen anybody do that at full speed running down. And we thought, we've made it. And that was the best kick we had.
You signing him for United must have been early in the shift where you took some of the power away from Ferguson. Yeah. So he must have come on your door and gone.
No, he was very party to it. He was equally very party to every decision.
How much did you spend on Veron?
27 at United.
Too much.
27 at United in a market where 27 now would be over 60, 70 probably. And at Chelsea, about 13, 14?
14.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
So about 40 mil combined, But
listen, it's not about absolute money, is it? We talked about, you mentioned Rio. For years he was the highest transfer fee, right? But we had him for so long, and he was such a critical aspect of that team and subsequent teams, and that's where it's not about the absolute money. Like if you can't afford it, you can't do it. You shouldn't do it. You maybe can do it, but you shouldn't do it. But if you can afford it, get the right ones, and they look cheap over.
Yeah. So 30 mil, which at the time I think was a huge amount of money, ended up being one of the best
record.
Deals. Yeah.
I mean, it was people thought we were crazy.
As a CEO, do you have favourites?
No, I don't. No, I don't think you do. I mean, you can't do, right? Because listen, the job is hire and fire, isn't it? Ultimately, so you can't get too close. I think we had a very listen. I've worked at two of the best clubs in the world, with some of the best players in the world, with some of, some great they're just good people as well, right? It's not about them just being good footballer. They're really good people, and when you get the electricity of that, people don't understand what high performance is, right? All those players wake up in the morning and work harder, want to succeed more, want to win. You don't have to tell them.
They set standards.
They set the standards, and they win. And whether that's a league, a cup, a game, they have a very short period of a night out or a bit of relaxation, and then they go again. They go again. The top players like win an FA Cup or win a league or win a European Championship, and it's like, let's go again. It is incredible.
Well, as you said, answering the question I asked earlier, it's probably why then Chelsea was successful over that time period, no matter who was the manager, because you had that spine of the team that drove that culture regardless of its management.
For sure. And the best example of that was that period between Jose leaving and nearly winning.
Should we do a quick fire round? Okay, so which club do you admire the most for how it's run?
Interestingly, I think Atletico Madrid.
Why is that?
The owner is incredible. He knows the sport. He's been in it since he was 19, right? He's always fought as being the underdog, right? He understands what Atletico stands for, and he's backed it to the point of pain. They've got this relationship with his coach and him, and what Atletico stand for. It's that perfect harmony.
It's a complete outlier, isn't it, in European football? When you mentioned your coaching piece earlier, where Simeone's been there for 12, 13, whatever years.
Simeone was like, they were perfect fits, right? He's better because of Atletico, and they're better because of him. It's that wonderful relationship.
What was the hardest transfer to get done on a buy side?
It was the Bison. Do you remember?
Oh, Michael Essien.
Yeah.
I loved Essien.
From Lyon.
Yeah.
Right?
26 mil.
The hardest 26 you've ever spent in your life.
Why?
Olas, who was the president, is the hardest negotiator in the world. And we went, I spent the whole summer. I went with the family into south of France. And Michael lived with us for about 4 weeks, and we'd go to the ground to try and do the deal, not do the deal, wouldn't meet, would meet. And we eventually, got it. I mean, 26 million was a lot of money, right? A lot of money. And again, Michael is one of the nicest footballers you will ever meet. And, but when he got on the pitch, he was a beast. I mean, he was.
Yeah, the tank.
Oh, but what a super person, but that was the toughest. Bizarrely, that was the toughest.
What's the proudest moment for you from the Chelsea time?
We talked about it. That first Premier League was everything coming together. I mean, the way we won it, where we won it, the players. I mean,
Lampard's double. Oh.
Yeah. I mean, such great. I mean, I've got so many great moments, right? I mean, being part of the Champions League '99 treble winning was awesome, but I think that moment it felt more like I was a bigger part of it because we'd sort of built it really quickly. It's fascinating.
Do you think new leagues like the MLS and the Saudi Pro League, do you think they sustain beyond flash in the pan financial outlays?
Saudi Pro League will. Right?
Why?
Because they're very smart people. It's against the plan. It's so different than the China plan, which was, about the president and people, doing Korean favours by buying a football club in a culture that just didn't understand it. First of all, I think Saudi's going to change the face of sport over the next 25 years. They're already starting to do that with boxing. They'll get there on golf. And it's sport is an integral part of their overall vision and strategy. It's not an adjunct and just a flash in the pan. and I think it's built on real pillars. It's built on pillars of bringing things that entertain and educate Saudis in Saudi. It's built, and that's an important piece of Saudiization when you get under the hood of it. That's a big part of it. I think those things portray Saudi in the best possible way to the rest of the world. They've got the money and the wherewithal to actually see it through. So again, it's a sustainable model. It's not built on sand. Pardon, Paul. I really didn't mean that. It is strong. It is really strong foundations where China wasn't. There is a big Saudiization in terms of it's really important to them that as these things go on, they produce more Saudis for the sport, within the sport, build out that. And they're just smart people. They're really, really smart people. And actually, they're nice people as well to deal with. So, but the smartness of them. And then, they're doing things like, okay, it's government backed, but then it's going to be government and industry, and ultimately it'll be private. So there's a plan. They've got the ambitions. They do things in periods and times that nobody else can even think of. I mean, it's phenomenal. Look, I'm involved with one of those teams on the board, and I see it from a different level. And the ambition is phenomenal. It's phenomenal, but the substance of them is also phenomenal.
Does the US sustain post Messi?
I mean, I went to Miami F1. I went to the game. I mean, it's hard to see how that keeps going after Messi because it's so messy. I mean, it's brilliant. I mean, you go, stadium's full. They're all wearing pink jerseys. 99% of them have got Messi on the back. It's very family. It's brilliant. They were playing Red Bull and hammered them 5-0 or something. I think MLS is here to stay, for sure. But I mean, it's competing against Goliaths in terms of American sports.
For consumer attention that is getting more and more tight.
Yeah. So I
always laugh at football when I say we're competing against Taylor Swift because we're competing for the same dollars and the same attention in a lot of cases.
Yeah, I mean, you've got the World Cup there in 26, right? It's going to be the most successful World Cup commercially, for sure. And you can already see dollars switching into it and various things. But as a sport, it's got huge challenges. Look, it's there to stay. It's not going to disappear. It's too ingrained. It's got a great grassroots. It's got great youth participation.
I guess it's a question of financial, isn't it, really? Because we ask it quite often from, an MLS franchise valuation now exceeds $1 billion pretty consistently. So it's like you're buying it at the peak of a bubble that is ultimately going to...
What was it? 92, I got offered one at £25,000 and I thought, you're crazy. When it was just starting, right? I mean, you look at those valuations and it's like, I don't understand it. But
well, it's the old US scarcity model value, isn't it?
No, for sure.
You just want to...
For sure.
And it plays into an ego market.
What would you most like to change about the world of football today? You can change one thing, magic wand.
Probably governance, I think.
The whole thing.
I wouldn't have it.
No. I'd have more of the right.
How much did Roman invest in Chelsea over the years? Just kind of ballpark.
A lot, right? I mean, over the years, a serious amount of money. But it was his money, right? It was his commitment, and if he wasn't forced to go, he'd still be there. So it was never an ROI model.
Yeah,
it was never an ROI model. So the metrics of that don't work, do they?
It was his.
It was his.
And it's the final one, which is like when you look towards your next chapter.
Yep.
What excites you most?
I think it's the same. I think it's the Williams piece is just as exciting as my other ventures in sport. It's different sport, but a lot of the same principles are there. Working with the right people is critically important, and I'm lucky enough to be old enough to be able to make those choices, because that really is what makes the difference with these things, the people and what you can build, and Williams has got all the opportunity. It's got those three wonderful things that I know we can bring Williams back to the very top of the sport, which is, challenging because we are an independent team, not got, the Goliath organisations around them. So you just got to be smarter and being part of something that gets there by being smarter. And that's what we did at United, and that's what we did at Chelsea. Different parameters in terms of cash. But you don't win things by not being the best at everything you do. And that's the buzz. That, who wouldn't want to be involved in sport when you can operate at that level?
It's an amazing way to finish it.
I mean, honestly, for us, it's shows like this which I think make us realise how much we love doing this, how lucky we are to do it. And so thank you for being such an amazing guest, and we really appreciate the time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.